What's up, metal and heavy music fans? Today we have a review of Mastodon and their new album Hushed and Grim via Reprise Records. The Atlanta progressive metal band is back at it again with their 9th album, featuring a sprawling 15 tracks over their most expansive runtime yet. In a way, it's almost surprising that this is Mastodon's first double album. It's a move I totally would have expected after Crack the Skye. But now that they've moved into this modern era of their sound, I went in pretty skeptical to this one. And once more, I thought in this case it would be appropriate to take you track by track on the same journey that Hushed and Grim took me on. We open with the noodly riffs of Pain with an Anchor. A decent enough start here with first and foremost lots of great drumming on display. The main hook is pretty haunting and one that gives off a serious air of melancholy. That sudden transition to the heavier part towards the end actually caught me off guard in the best possible way, and I definitely appreciate the prog sensibilities in the overall structure. From here we continue with The Crux, which has a promising intro also on the heavy side, but the vocals on this one have me on the fence. In a weird way, it reminds me of stuff we'd hear on the radio alongside Incubus in the 2000s. More great drum fills are put in the spotlight, especially during the interlude, but I do wish that the guitars on this part were a little bit more interesting. And ultimately, this one loses me in the slower section, which gets downright boring, to be honest. Next up is the single Sickle and Peace. I was interested with those brief female vocals in the intro, although they don't really go anywhere, and the proggy riff on this one is intriguing as well, but the vibe is weird. Everyone's going for this kind of quiet, or more appropriately hushed, approach as if they are playing in a library with vocals that are a little bit off-putting. And then the transition to the heavy part here is far less successful. I feel like that big chugging distortion should hit hard when it comes in, but honestly, I get nothing from it.
Rabulator. Feel nothing anymore.
At over 6 minutes, this track feels as if it's trying too hard to be epic, but not really succeeding, even with the admittedly cool flourishes of string. More Than I Could Chew also has a big, chugging, semi-doom metal sound, one that I would expect from the likes of Red Fang. All said and done, it's pretty straightforward, kind of repetitive, and frankly also a little bit dull, again, if you ask me. This is followed by The Beast, and with a title like that, I wasn't expecting a twangy guitar a la Lynyrd Skynyrd or the Allman Brothers. This could be an interesting idea, but especially back to back with the previous song, I'm still pretty bored. It's a shame because the vocals are actually pretty heartstring pulling, but it's just not enough to carry the weaker elements. Then Skeleton of Splendor kicks in, and at this point my immediate reaction was, another soft track? I have nothing against Mastodon's slower moments as a whole, but when it's back to back to back like this, I pretty much just check out. I really tried, but I just don't find anything interesting about this one. It's not only painfully dull, it's also generic. Tear Drinker brings us back to the singles territory. I could really use something faster at this point, but at least this one has some energy behind it, and a pretty solid earworm hook to boot. Unfortunately, it also has that newer, glossier vocal production I really hate from Emperor of Sand, most notably on Brand singing parts. And when rating this not just as a track, but a single, the songs that are supposed to showcase the best of what to expect from Mastodon as a whole, this one ranks very low in their discography. Fortunately, Pushing the Tides fares much better and was the single that actually piqued my interest to begin with. The sheer heaviness, infectious groove, and kind of unsettling vocals of the verses have strong Leviathan and Blood Mountain vibes. And while the chorus falls more in line with their recent albums, at least it's memorable and even pretty catchy. But most of all, I love all of the noisy, kind of mathy guitar work. This is the side of Mastodon I've really been missing in recent years. Speaking of which, here we go with Peace and Tranquility, the opening of which is about as proggy as it gets, almost sounding like something off of a later career Death album. I actually got really excited for a minute with this one, but then they have to go and kill my buzz again with more soft and fuzzy stuff that, not to bring up Incubus again, but reminds me of the unfortunate disjointed saccharine turn they took from the Like Grenades era onwards. In a word, this track is seriously corny. Dagger sports another interesting intro with the Hammond organ and effects-soaked vocals. Very moody, almost a Mr. Crowley kind of vibe going on, but with big pounding drums building tension in the background. Later on, it opens up into some regional instrumentation too, including what sounds like a Morin Kur and maybe a sitar. This all makes for great atmosphere, but also feels like it's constantly building up to a big cathartic release that never actually comes. More sonic blue balls from promising beginnings. Alright, y'all ready for another another slow and sappy track? Cause I'm not. I have even less to say about Had It All than Skeletons of Splendor, and mind you, I actually forgot the name of that track and had to look it up again when I was writing this. That's how little it did for me. Not even the solo's that great. I couldn't wait for this one to be over. But Savage Lands wakes me up again with, oh my god, is that a D-beat?
At last we meet for the first time for the last time.
Joking aside though, there are a lot of great shifts in the beat on this one to keep you guessing, and they often take the song through sudden shifts in tone as well. It sounds very mysterious, like we're journeying into someone's psyche. It's still not one of their best tracks by a long shot, but as far as the album goes, this is certainly a standout. Gobblers of Dregs also brings lots of atmosphere to the game, but without the substance to really flesh it out. Just another piece of driftwood floating downstream. There is a shift around the middle that actually reminded me a bit of the interlude from Tool's Schism, but without nearly the same level of intrigue, and there's just not enough payoff here to warrant the 8+ minute investment. Once more, I mourn the glory days of Crack the Skye. Winding down here, we've got Eyes of Serpents with kind of a southern folksy flair, complete with slide guitar solo. A little Tom Waits or In the Company of Serpents energy coming through, but with some pretty sorrowful melodic elements as well. I think I can even make out some very subtle piano in the background. And later on, I like the backup vocals with the ghostly ooh-oohs. Once again, one of what I would call the better songs on the album, and far more deserving of the longer runtime, but still not memorable enough to truly stand out amidst their classic material. And finally, we close with potentially one of the sappiest tracks on the entire album, Gigantium. I'll admit that my head starts reflexively slowly grooving along with it, but then that's true of plenty of songs I hear on the radio despite not really caring for them.
Can't stop doing the monkey!
Ultimately, y'all, it makes me really sad to say this, but I think this is a new contender for my least favorite Mastodon album. I know that's bound to make some people mad, but it gives me no pleasure to say that as a longtime fan. I was really hoping it would be a return to form, but if anything, it just gives me a newfound respect for Emperor of Sand. For all of the issues I had with that album, at least it had some pretty strong moments like Sultan's Curse, Steam Breather, and Andromeda. Hushed and Grim by comparison gives me virtually nothing, which is especially depressing for a double album. Not a single track I'd really care to add to my playlist. Even as someone who actually enjoys Once More Around the Sun, I fear that the glory days of Mastodon may truly be over. Turning to my scales, I give Hushed and Grim a 6 for enjoyability. More often than not, I'm just plain bored. Nothing is terrible, but nothing is really engaging either. I give it an 8 for musicianship. The performances are fine, but it's also some of the band's least interesting songwriting to date. And I give it a 7 for innovation. One could argue that it's a different album for them, but not in any way that I can actually praise. So a flat 7 overall and a C- for Mastodon and Hushed and Grim. Check out my Mastodon tier list for my thoughts on the rest of their discography, or my bands like Mastodon list for some groups still dropping really great albums in a similar style. And let me know what you thought of this album down in the comments, but that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.